Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. British Foreign Minister David Lammy and US Vice President JD Vance will meet Ukrainian and European allies in Britain on Saturday to discuss President Trump's push for peace in Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke to President Zelensky ahead of the security meeting. This comes as President Zelensky says peace talks without Ukraine will not achieve anything as US and Russia prepare for discussions on August the 15th. He reaffirmed Ukraine will not surrender land despite Trump's hint at territorial concessions. Several Arab and Muslim countries have condemned Israel's plan to take control of Gaza City as a dangerous escalation. 20 nations, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, called it a flagrant violation of international law and an attempt to entrench illegal occupation. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan urged Muslim nations to unite and mobilize the international community against Israel's plan to take control of Gaza City. Fidan made the comments after talks in Egypt, where he also announced an emergency meeting of the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation. Iran has arrested 20 people alleged to be operatives for Israel's Mossad spy agency in recent months, with the judiciary warning of no leniency. This comes after the execution of nuclear scientist Rosber Vadi, convicted of spying for Israel. 5 Lebanese soldiers were killed in an explosion while removing munitions from a Hezbollah military facility in South Lebanon. The incident occurred during efforts to disable unexploded ordnance left over from the recent Israel-Hezbollah war. NATO has hailed the signing of a US-brokered peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan as a significant step forward. NATO spokeswoman Alison Hart thanked US President Donald Trump for his efforts in bringing peace to the region. Thousands gathered in Nagasaki, Japan on Saturday to honor the 80th anniversary of the city's atomic bombing, with the mayor warning of risks of nuclear war in today's global conflicts. The US dropped Fat Man bomb on August the 9th in 1945, killing 27,000 people instantly. We start this hour in the Middle East, where several Arab and Muslim countries condemned Israel's recent plan to take control of Gaza City as a dangerous escalation amid the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Around 20 nations, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, denounced the move as a blatant violation of international law and an attempt to solidify illegal occupation by imposing a fiat accompli, undermining legitimacy. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, speaking after talks in Egypt with Egyptian officials and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, called for Muslim nations to unite and mobilize the international community against Israel's actions. He announced that the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation would convene an emergency meeting to coordinate a response to the escalating situation in Gaza. We're now joined by Yossi Kapelwasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Yossi, always a pleasure to talk to you and have you on the program. Yossi, what are your thoughts on Israel's new plans to take over the entire Gaza Strip? Israel currently controls over 75% of it, but Benjamin Netanyahu plans to take over 100% of the Strip, much to the dismay of the Israeli people and also his defense chief. What are your thoughts on these new IDF plans?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I must say that all the plans that we are considering now, this is a problematic plan. But unfortunately, this is the best of the bad options that we have. And all the other ways that and by the way, we were very reluctant from doing that throughout the 22 months that this war has been fought already. because we don't want to govern the Gaza Strip and we don't want to use force in order to remove Hamas from power. If we could have done it in some other magical way, it would have been better. But what we have learned throughout this war is that we cannot make it happen without really taking over the territory. And the idea that we should be able to release the hostages through a deal didn't materialize. And Hamas refused to do that and went away from the negotiation table. So we had no other option but to really use force in order to remove Hamas from power and bring the hostages back home.
Yossi, you say it's the best of a bad bunch of options. However, who are really voicing their opposition to this are some of the hostage families. Do you think it's wise for the Israeli military to be reoccupying into territory that might put the current hostages in Gaza at risk?
Not smart, but it's necessary. It's, as I said, the smartest way to reach it was to reach an agreement that would return the hostages and will have also the commitment of Hamas to disarm themselves. If we could have reached such an agreement, it would have been much better, but we just can't. And that's why we have to do that. Yes, it is a risk for the lives of the hostages. It is a risk of having to rule over the population of Gaza. Nobody wants that. It is a risk that people will lose their lives. It is a financial risk because it's going to cost us a lot of money to rule over Gaza for even a short period of time. We don't mean to stay there. We mean to handle it, to hand it over to other forces once they feel comfortable enough to assume responsibility, especially Gazans who are able to do that if there are any. Right now, they are not going to be courageous enough in order to say so because they're afraid that Hamas will kill them. So we need to take it over and for some period of time to convince Gazans that Hamas is not coming back and that they can feel comfortable of taking responsibility for their own lives, living next to Israel and not trying to destroy Israel. But the only way to accomplish this now is by a military operation that would remove Hamas from power. That's the only option left, unfortunately.
Yossi, international condemnation is once again growing from this new announcement. Foreign governments have urged Israel not to carry out this plan, saying that it will only cause more bloodshed for the Palestinian people and will also put the hostages in danger. Do you think Israel's actions is in a severe risk of completely isolating itself, not only from the Arab nations around the world, but also its allies? We saw the United Kingdom release a statement condemning and asking Israel to rethink their military strategy. What are your thoughts about how this is going to affect Israel long-term geopolitically?
Well, first of all, those countries are wrong. What we're going to do is going to help the Palestinians living in Gaza and not put them in harm's way. On the contrary, what we mean to do is to evacuate them from the city of Gaza so that we should be able to operate there against Hamas without risking the population. And this, by removing them from Gaza City, it's going to also improve considerably their ability to get the humanitarian aid that is pouring into Gaza. Because today, when this humanitarian aid reaches the city of Gaza and its environs, it's confiscated and looted by Hamas and by all kinds of criminal gangs. So once we are going to be in charge of distributing the aid, as we are today in the southern part of Gaza, the situation is going to improve considerably. And as the Americans said, we are planning to build many more distribution centers that are going to be under our control so that the humanitarian aid would reach the Palestinian population. And secondly, all those who criticize us should come with their own ideas. Okay, let's hear, what is your idea? How you propose to convince Hamas to disarm itself? If you have any other proposal, we would be very happy to use it. They tell us that Hamas should be disarmed, but how do they think it's going to happen? I don't see many UK soldiers on the way to Gaza to take care of that, nor German soldiers. So unfortunately, we have to do it ourselves. And yes, we are going to take care of the population, and we are not going to stay there. We're not in the business of occupying Gaza. We don't want to occupy Gaza. We want to have the Gazans rule over themselves with the support of the international community and with the Arab moderate states. That's what we have in mind. But to make all of that happen, we have to first remove Hamas from power. And that can be done only with military operation. We have to understand, if we don't do that, if we leave Hamas in power, it would mean that the 7th of October was a very successful operation from the point of view of Hamas. And with everybody, with UK, France, and Germany siding with Hamas on this matter, that Hamas really feels that they did a very successful move. Not only that everybody calls Israel not to attack them, but some of these countries are also ready to recognize the Palestinian state. Wonderful. That's really very rewarding to carry out a 7th of October type of attacks against Israel. Massacre the Jews and you'll get recognition. It's this is unbelievable that it happens at this point of time. It's I mean, we haven't seen any move on the Palestinian side to justify something like that. On the contrary, they massacre Jews. They refuse to accept Israel's state.
This is just to unfortunately we have to wrap up this conversation. These statements were urged by these three G7 members that you were talking about: France, the UK, and Germany and Canada, apologies, in response to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They've asked for it to de-escalate. Yossi, I do apologize, we have to wrap up on that story. However, you are staying with us to discuss further updates from the West Asian region. We move over to Lebanon now, where, according to reports, 5 soldiers have been killed in a blast while removing munitions from a Hezbollah military facility in South Lebanon. Sources say the explosion occurred inside the facility as troops were handling munitions and unexploded ordnance left over from the recent war between Israel and the group. The source, who requested anonymity as they were not authorized to brief the media, confirmed all 5 soldiers died in the blast. The Lebanese army has not yet issued an official statement. However, President Joseph Aoun has said that he spoke to the army commander, Radolf Hakial, and he described what happened as a painful incident that resulted in dead and wounded personnel. In a statement, the presidency said the explosion occurred as an engineering unit was working to remove and disable the ordnance. We're once again joined by Yossi Kapawasa to discuss this further. What can you tell us, Yossi, about the recent situation in South Lebanon? Obviously, we saw a deal, a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah announced late last year. What are your thoughts on the current stability of that region? And obviously, there is a long-term aim for Hezbollah to disarm. That hasn't occurred yet, and they've also rejected that. What is your analysis on the stability of the south of Lebanon and also Hezbollah's capabilities in this day and age?
Well, first of all, of course, I think all Israelis feel sorry for the Lebanese army soldiers that lost their lives in this explosion. It's good that the Lebanese army is trying to do something about the situation in southern Lebanon, because what we expect to happen is that South Lebanon will be empty of Hezbollah operatives so that it will not constitute a threat to the security of the Israelis living on the other side of the border. And for that to happen, we and the Lebanese army are trying to disarm Hezbollah, and especially in the south. But Hezbollah, for the time being, refuses to cooperate with this. They keep their efforts to rebuild their capabilities, their military capabilities in general, and particularly in the south, which forces us to carry out from time to time attacks against their operatives who try to improve the conditions in the southern part of Lebanon that they are supposed to evacuate according to this agreement from late last year. And of course, they ignore it altogether. And what's more encouraging is that the Lebanese government, under American pressure, has decided to prepare a plan for the disarming of Hezbollah in the foreseeable future. And they're supposed to take action in order for that to happen, because Hezbollah refuses to do it on their own initiative. So it's a very encouraging and promising development. I'm not sure that the Lebanese government, through its military, is really able to do that, because Hezbollah today is quite a strong force, even though it was weakened considerably by what we did to them throughout 2024. But still, they are much stronger than the Lebanese army, in my mind. We'll see how the Lebanese army work out a way to handle this matter. I sincerely hope that they are going to be successful. This is going to be much better for the people of Lebanon, for the people of Israel, and for everybody who is interested in peace.
Yes, thank you very much, Yossi Kapelwasser, for joining us here on NewsX World to discuss those updates from the West Asian region. Thank you. Your insight is very much appreciated. Let's move over to Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer share the same view on the danger of Russia trying to force talks on the impossible. In a call, both backed continued pressure on Moscow and welcomed US-UK efforts to seek peace. London says it will host Western national security advisors on Saturday to discuss the war. Zelensky urged allies to take clear steps to end Russia's invasion. Meanwhile, on Kiev streets, many Ukrainians voiced deep skepticism over an upcoming Trump-Putin meeting. Families of fallen soldiers and serving troops reject any territorial concessions, warning Putin will only demand more. Let's listen in to what a Ukrainian has had to say.
Жоден військовий не погодиться на здачу територій, на відвід військ з українських територій. Моя думка така, що ці всі прапорці, вони не мають даремно бути тут поставлені. Це життя віддані за землю України. Якщо це дійсно станеться, якщо дійсно ми розмінна монета в кінці кінців будемо, ще таке питання, задля чого ми тоді наші копалини віддали? Якби трошки не зрозуміло. Для того, щоб капітулювати тепер? Ну, це таке питання. Це взагалі на Аляскі у них буде зустріч. Ну, це для мене це взагалі нонсенс. Ми віддали все, тепер вони зустрічаються. Ну, це, вибачте, ну це просто посмішище якесь, не знаю. Я не знаю.
We're now joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst, and he joins us live from London to discuss this further. Mark, first of all, before we get into the big development of today, we've just read a statement out from the Ukrainian president describing the relationship between the United Kingdom and Ukraine. Keir Starmer faces a lot of criticism in the United Kingdom for his domestic policy. However, how would you analyse his foreign policy, especially when it comes to the Ukraine conflict?
It's understandable that he has the domestic criticism. Sorry, Thomas, good to be with you. And but the key thing is that he has made it very plain. He's laid out the carpet to say, I am standing with Zelensky, standing with Ukraine, no matter what is constantly recycled here, constantly said, saying we need to increase the military within the UK, increase military within Europe, etc. He is totally that's his line. He's standing four square with Ukraine, but there must be part of him that wishes this war to end like the rest of us do, and that is the important thing here, Thomas. You and I have discussed this before. We want people to get round the table and have this discussion and to reach peace as a sustainable ceasefire as soon as possible. But that is Prime Minister Starmer's stance, to stand with the Ukrainian, to stand with Zelensky.
Yes, Mark. Now let's move on to the huge announcement today, which was a meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on August the 15th. Ukraine and President Zelensky won't be present as per the plans right now. If this meeting does go ahead with just the United States and Russia taking part, do you think there can be any real progress made, especially after President Zelensky has said that Ukraine is not ready to make territorial concessions?
Well, this is the difficulty. I mean, at the moment, the Russians, with the regions that they're looking at, you could then argue, if you look at it geographically and measure, that potentially it's about a fifth the Ukrainian land that they would then say this is now part of Russian territory, and this is then that phrase when it says they want us to negotiate on the impossible, which is land that was Ukrainian, and the Russians are saying we have moved in here. This is now it. The key thing, as we say, we need to get them round the table. There's been accusations to say that Putin has really pulled the wool over Donald Trump's eyes, President Trump's eyes. And then we've got all this by using things like the Ghost Fleet to constantly sell oil via boats that don't seem to be registered under the Russian flag, where President Trump has threatened using more and more sanctions against Russia to get, by using economic warfare in that sense, to get Russia to the table. The Russians press reporting saying, well, Russia has won here because President Zelensky is not going to be part of the negotiations. And as you have said in the earlier report about security analyst meeting in the UK today at evening, they will then putting all these people together to get the advice. We just have to hope and pray that, yes, they'll have that conversation with Putin, but then open the door to get Zelensky around the table. But the problem is, as President Zelensky has already said, we will not give up territory. Well, they have militarily, but this is not part of the negotiation. We want peace, but we want our land back. I suppose saying it that simply, and it is understandable, especially within all the devastation that's been caused since February 2022. Thomas.
Yes, Mark. We have seen a change in stance from Donald Trump when it comes to the Russian president. We've seen him get increasingly frustrated with Vladimir Putin. However, what we do know, what Donald Trump does like, is a camera and a photo opportunity, and also meeting great, powerful leaders. Do you think that Donald Trump, after this meeting, there's a possibility of him turning on Zelensky again? How do you analyze that, how Donald Trump maneuvers himself, given the past behavior of him during this conflict and during his second term as president?
I believe that President Trump believes in relationships. There comes a point when he wants to negotiate this personally, takes it very, very personally. As you know, leading up to his second administration winning, he said, I will sort this war out in days. Sadly, he hasn't been able to sort this war out in days. It's taken 200 days so far. But he relies on those personal relationships. We saw, you remember the way President Zelensky behaved in the White House between the President Trump and Vance, Vice President Vance. I mean, in many ways, it was interesting for the camera, and it was an interesting insight. But President Trump has always valued, I believe, the relationship that he has with Putin. We're not getting into Russia, and all those fraudulent allegations. But it does come down to, I believe, personal relationships, Thomas. That is what he actually prides himself on. Plus, he wants, in all sincerity, he wants to see this appalling war stop with all the deaths and the carnage that has come with it. And he is very, very genuine about that. And of course, he doesn't like people trying to pull the wool over his eyes at all. And there is a feeling that that has actually happened from by the Russians. He wants sincerity to say, do you want to win this?
Yes, Mark, thank you very much for that insight on that developing topic. And we, of course, here at NewsX will continue to bring you all updates coming out of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. We now stay in Europe for our next story, where NATO is welcoming the signing of a US-brokered peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, calling it a significant step forward after decades of conflict. In a social media post, Alliance spokeswoman Alison Hart said NATO welcomes progress towards peace and thanked US President Donald Trump for what she called his investments in peace. The agreement ends years of tension between the two former Soviet republics, who have fought multiple wars over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. The peace deal is being seen as a rare breakthrough in a volatile part of the South Caucasus. Thank you very much. Once again, Mark, you join us to discuss this significant development. Why is this such a breakthrough for Donald Trump? There are talks about him receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. What more can you tell us about this conflict that now we have seen a real diplomatic breakthrough here?
Historically, of course, Nagorno-Karabakh, this region has been in tension, especially after the Soviet Union officially fell then, the wall coming down 1989, leading up to that. This particular region has always been in conflict and having that disputed territory between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And to see an end to this is highly significant. And Thomas, I would say again, that this is the levers of economic pressure. Azerbaijan is also not necessarily a full member of the Abraham Accords yet, but is on that sort of outside but very near satellite circling. And President Trump has always got his eye on, as saying previously, eye on China. And he sees that getting peace deals, getting economic deals between countries, that is what brings the peace. But also he is then wanting those relationships personally as well, because as a bulwark before any other influence that China wishes to have in any region that it wishes to then go into. What is also significant to throw in here, you know, Azerbaijan also trades with Israel. There's a very, very strong relationship there, strong energy with oil, etc. So again, it's building up these alliances that maybe that we're not aware of, that there's a little ripple effect that goes into a larger ripple effect. And as I say, any war that is being sincerely negotiated to a lasting peace deal can all but be an extremely good thing. And especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, there has been, I mean, at some point that also he's also viewing Kurdistan as a good bulwark and as another satellite there ready as well. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mark, and for joining us here on the programme. We now move over to South Asia next, where India's Air Force chief says the country shot 6 Pakistani military aircraft during clashes in May, 5 fighter jets and 1 larger aircraft, possibly a surveillance plane. Chief Marshal A.P. Singh told an event in Bangalore that most were downed by India's Russian-made S-400 missile system, calling it the largest ever recorded surface-to-air kill. He said strikes also damaged other surveillance planes and several F-16Ss on the ground. Pakistan denies losing any aircraft and says it downed 6 Indian planes, including a Rafale. India admits some losses but rejects that number. Islamabad has yet to respond to Singh's remarks. Here's what India's Chief Air Marshal A.P. Singh had to say in a statement.
Aircraft tried to penetrate our defenses. Our air defense systems have done a wonderful job. The S-400 system, which we had recently bought, has been a game changer. The range of that system has really kept their aircraft away from their weapons like, those long-range glide bombs that they have. They've not been able to use any one of those because they've not been able to penetrate the system. We were able to get there at least 2 command and control centers in like Murid and Chaklala that I've shown you one of the pictures. At least 6 radars, some of them big, some of them small. 2 SAGW system that is in Lahore and Okara. Then, of course, runway at Sargodha and Rahimia Khan.
We're now joined by Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's a senior strategic and defence expert. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. What's the significance about this, Major General? Claims from both sides when it comes to the number of planes downed. What are your thoughts on this development today and the statements made by the Secretary of Defense?
Thank you, Thomas, for bringing me to this program. You see, why the Air Chief has come out with this information now is primarily to counter the narrative which has been floating around in the Western media as well as in Pakistan with regard to losses of Indian aircraft. Because the Indian government or the Indian establishment has not brought out any information or a press briefing to state the number of aircrafts which have been lost by India, though they have confirmed some losses, but numbers have not been, communicated. And they have also countered, the Indian defense establishment or the Ministry of Defense has also countered the claim which is being made that India has lost 6 aircrafts in which 3 of them were Rafales. So I think there was a need to present a counter narrative also to tell our side of the story, because we have been only hearing the adversary telling his side of the story. So I think to that extent the Air Chief has come out in a very honest and systematic manner in which he has used a fair amount of evidence. He has used satellite images, videos, and also the videos which have been taken from the weapon systems, because those are the most authentic ones. As well as he has stated that some information he has collected from open sources. So to suggest that there were losses on the Pakistan side also to the tune of 5 fighter aircrafts and 1 their airborne early warning command control system, which is something like a AVAC, airborne radar, which can penetrate deep into the territory of the other country, almost a range of 400 to 500 kilometers. So I think he has clarified a lot of things, and one important aspect which he has mentioned is, because it was being debated in the Indian Parliament, where the opposition parties of India were taking the government to a task, was that were there any restrictions imposed on the Indian Air Force or the Indian Armed Forces by the political establishment with regard to the political aim. So he has made it very, very clear in absolutely no uncertain terms that there were no restrictions imposed, and if there were restrictions, it was from the forces themselves.
Yes, Major General, thank you very much for providing that insight and, of course, for joining us on the programme. Well, that's all that we have time for, unfortunately, this hour, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.